Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Thank you for joining us for another segment of Health Professional Radio. We'll be speaking with Mike Knox. Now, Mike's a father and an author, the author of the book, Vivien's Reign, My Daughter's Battle with Epilepsy. He's going to share his journey with his daughter, who was diagnosed with epilepsy when she was 2. She's now 16 years of age, and he's also going to talk a bit about Vivien's success with VNS Therapy. His recent efforts have been focused on passing a law for police and law enforcement in California to be trained on seizures and seizure first aid, with the hope that his efforts will result in bringing peace of mind to families who are raising kids with epilepsy and reducing the stigma associated with the condition. Welcome to Health Professional Radio, Mike. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Give us a little insight into who Mike Knox is.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I am a retired parole agent, and my wife and I have been active with advocacy for epilepsy for 14 years. My daughter's 16 now, and I'm working on trying to get a bill in the state of California passed to train law enforcement to recognize epilepsy. There's a huge stigma about epilepsy. And so that's what I'm fighting for currently.
Were you aware of the condition prior to your daughter's diagnosis at the age of 2?
No.
So there was a lot of learning for you and your wife, I'm assuming.
Yes, huge learning curve. Didn't know, had never met anybody, didn't know anything about it.
What led to her diagnosis? Was there something going on at home?
So she had, from birth to 2, she was fine, but it took about 5 years to diagnose her. But basically, she had a fetal stroke, so her brain didn't form correctly.
Are there other causes?
That was it. If you look at her MRI, you can see she has seizures coming from 4 different areas, and that's why it wasn't controlled with medication. Is
this something that is common that happens with children, or is this kind of a rarity?
No, it is pretty common. I mean, there's 65 million people with epilepsy, and there's the most children in the state of California with epilepsy. We just got a bill passed to train teachers at school campuses, because my daughter was going to school for many years and nobody was trained to how to recognize the seizure.
Were there challenges with getting the teachers involved in this training, and do you anticipate similar challenges or even greater challenges when dealing with law enforcement?
Yes, it's just all a challenge. It is basically just getting people educated, and that's what I've come to believe, is if we can get a law passed through the states, then the training will follow.
How surprised were you and your wife to discover the amount of stigma associated with such a common condition?
I was very surprised. I mean, epilepsy's been around thousands of years, and to go through all of it and to relive it all the time, and just to the lack of empathy that we would get as parents, and trying to connect with other parents with children that had epilepsy, it was very difficult.
Now, when you say the lack of empathy, we're talking about kids here. I can see maybe adult to adult lack of empathy, but when we're talking about kids, I guess that was even more shocking.
That was even more shocking. I was getting no empathy from the other kids. But again, it is all about educating the kids. You know, they didn't know anything about epilepsy. They didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was. So I have to really look at both sides and empathize for those other kids that didn't know what it was. And my wife and I would sit down with teachers and nurses and schools, and we would go in and educate ourselves to our children's schools. And once the children understood what epilepsy was, then you would get the empathy.
Explain to our listeners what VNS therapy is, and is anyone with epilepsy a good candidate for this type of therapy?
Sure. VNS Therapy is a medical device for my daughter's epilepsy that's designed to prevent seizures before they start and stop. The device is placed underneath the skin of her chest and sends mild pulses through her vagus nerve, which then goes to the brain to stop her seizures. The device is programmed by a physician who can adjust the therapy settings to match her needs. So in terms of benefits for VNS, it's an add-on treatment for ages 4 and older. It's used by over 125,000 people worldwide right now, and that's including 35,000 children. It's been around over 20 years. And, my wife, my family, we were going to a doctor for 5 years that never mentioned VNS. Wow. And so it's such a great add-on treatment. I look at it like it's the tool in the toolbox.
You mentioned that it has to be adjusted or set by a physician, obviously, and installed under the skin by a physician. But as Vivien's caregiver, do you have access in case something needs to be adjusted? You're there with her all the time. You're seeing some of the changes that take place in her life. Do you have access?
I don't have access, but you can go to the doctor and have access. And really what that is just the information. It's working. It's on an auto stimulation. So it's going, on and off. Her setting is a low setting, and it's going on and off every 30 seconds. So it's sending that impulse to her. And the great thing about it is it's not a medication. So she went through many medications that failed her. And, we would have to carry a rescue medication. We'd have to carry a syringe, which, family and friends didn't want to carry a syringe. Yeah. Now you can carry a magnet, and we haven't had to use that in 6 years. She hasn't had a seizure in 6 years. I mean, she was having seizures all the time. It was impeding every aspect of her life. And, she couldn't grow as a child. It was very frightening for me as a father, where she was just declining rapidly. And it's so great to see with VNS where she's prospering. She's a 16-year-old now that's excited about getting her driver's license. I never foresaw that ever happening.
Back to law enforcement in California. Is there stigma that you're aware of among law enforcement? I mean, lots of people will call 911 for a medical emergency, not really expecting the police to show up, expecting an ambulance because they called for a medical condition. But the police normally show up for 911 calls, correct? Correct.
And I would have a lot of arguments with the police or paramedics people just weren't aware of what a seizure was or what epilepsy was. And that is why also with my job in law enforcement I'm showing up at people's homes, and I could see that these people are having a seizure, and other medical people were saying, no, that's not, no, they're just mentally ill. And so there was a huge, lack of information and education in law enforcement. And I saw that every day working in the community in Los Angeles.
Have you been making headway? Has it become promising?
Yes, it's just very slow. And again, it's just politics. It's having to contact. I have to get basically a sponsor who's a politician. And I did that before with educating teachers. It's just that somebody else was able to get there before me.
Tell us why you are so passionate about being on the radio as opposed to simply taking care of your daughter and your family, maybe those in your close circle.
Well, now that my daughter is seizure-free, I actually have the time to go out and to me, I'm trying to communicate to other people that there is a stigma, that there is a problem, because there's so many people that have just given up. And I meet all those people. I was just at a convention for epilepsy at Disneyland, and you meet hundreds of people that are, it's just sad. Their kids don't want to go out because they're afraid people are going to make fun of them because they have epilepsy, or the parents don't know how to communicate. They don't know who to reach out to. And a lot of them don't even know that VNS exists. I mean, my wife and I, again, didn't know that VNS Therapy existed.
Mike, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. I'm hopeful that your efforts will be fruitful there in the state of California. And give us a website where our listeners can learn more about you and pick up a copy of Vivien's Reign, My Daughter's Battle with Epilepsy.
It's available on Amazon.com. My website is MikeKnox.com. And if you want to find out anything else about VNS Therapy, it's VNSTherapy.com.
Great. Mike, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Hoping you'll return and tell us how things are going with you as time goes on.
I would love to. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard, in conversation with Mike Knox. Audio copies of this program are available at hpr.fm and healthprofessionalradio.com.au. You can also subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, listen in, download at Anchor and Spotify, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com, Health Professional Radio.